Well, hello everyone, and welcome to episode 28 of Concede, a podcast about Hearthstone. My name is Kenny, and all the way from Thunder Bluff, Louisiana, we have Jace, aka Cinder. Cinder, how you doing?
That's pretty good. We had kind of a short week going from recording on Thursday and then all the way through the holiday weekend, and here we are right back at it. But it's always good to be here.
Yeah, the weekend went quick for me, that's for sure. And all the way from Undercity, Georgia, we have Andres. Andres, what have you been up to?
I've been overwatching like I've been doing the past few weeks. The game has consumed my life. And aside from that, been just doing the daily quests and doing a ton of home errands. We just moved into a new apartment, so I've been having to hang posters and buy vacuums and all that stuff.
Being domestic.
Being domestic, very domestic. I mean, it's nice because working on your own house is nice, but God, it takes so much time.
It is. Cinder, have you been playing much, or what have you been up to?
Um, well, holiday weekend kind of cuts into gaming time with family responsibilities and whatnot, but still pushing my mech secrets. Got it up to rank 4 today, actually. So I wish I had more time in the month because I'll push it all the way to legend. But yeah, 4 is fine. As long as I get to the 500 wins, I'm happy.
Nice. Yeah, I
Very
haven't
nice.
had much time to play this weekend. It was just family time, and only time I really got to play was at what 1:40 a.m. last night, just because my son woke up. But yeah, let's go ahead and get on with the show. So if you have any questions during the show, please tweet at us at CoinConcede or ask in our Twitch chat, um, and we may read them while we're in the email section. We have an email we got this week, so can't wait to get to that. Let's go ahead and uh, jump right into the news. All right, so not much for the news this week. We have Team Five is talking about Hearthstone on the as far as an article that was released through IGN, basically talking about Ben Brode actually got on social media and was talking about how this is not a typical Warcraft lore, as it's more of a what if on Warcraft lore. Cinder, did you get to catch any of this?
Yeah, I saw the article. I thought it was cool to actually get confirmation on that because I know the lore geeks were starting to get worried with the old
Yeah.
gods getting introduced as live actual threats, and then the new Ragnaros kind of flipped everybody's lids. But they kind of went into it and said, hey, this is just fun. It's just kind of a what if scenario. Yeah, nothing to worry about. Just
I
keep
think
your
it was the Ragnaros and then the reveal of Nusath
yeah.
exclusively for Hearthstone, right? Because nobody had ever seen him before. Some people went a little crazy and were like, "Hey, what is happening here? Why is Hearthstone getting all these things? And what is happening? Wow!" But I think it was just like a clear up that Ben Brode had to do of like, "Hey guys, Hearthstone is just a lighthearted take on the universe of Warcraft, and we want to take some liberties." And I don't know. I think Hearthstone is big enough right now, like a significant chunk of Blizzard's income, to where maybe they have a little power to now be like, "Hey, how about we get to reveal Nusath?"
Yeah, I think I read a stat that they were clearing about 40 million a month on in Hearthstone income.
Wow, yeah.
That's a
I mean,
lot.
I would believe it.
Yeah, there's certain people that are actually looking forward to some of the stuff that's released with this expansion in Hearthstone, particularly because they haven't seen it in WoW. They've only heard about it in books or in the lore. So it's interesting that in Hearthstone they're going to actually have some card art along with some of these characters that they haven't heard of before. So that's I think what everyone is excited about. And then when they actually hear something like uh, what's happening with Ragnaros, they kind of starting to bring all the pitchforks and stuff. So
Yeah. But talking about card art, though, how about the card art for this expansion? Wow, it's been super, super amazing. I'm super excited for it.
It's super next level, definitely.
Yeah, I feel like when they started Hearthstone, they used a lot of the artwork that they already had for both the WoW TCG and some stock artwork they had at Blizzard. But I think now it's just the Hearthstone team coming up with all these cards, and like artists, especially printing this for Hearthstone, and you can, I don't know, I feel like the quality has been stepped up. I don't know if it's just me.
No, it's true, and in fact, having been an old WoW TCG player, I recognized quite a lot of the art from the basic set.
Hmm.
But as we've progressed, they've been getting new art for everything, and it's great.
Yeah, I mean, I am totally down for that. Good job.
Shall we go ahead and mention an example on a I don't know if you heard about Mike Dene mentioning. Now imagine the world where Ragnaros says "live insect" at the end of your turn and heals you instead of turning 8 damage, dealing 8 damage to your opponent. So
I hope they voice acted that. I really want to hear that in game. Live insect, and then hear the healing noise come up.
we'll definitely see an interest. Well, do you want to talk about that a little bit as far as the in the article? Well, okay, I'll talk a little bit about it. So Ragnaros actually was when you play it. Your opponent plays as more minions to kind of counteract the randomness of the effect that it uses on board. So what they wanted to do, especially with this expansion, how everything is kind of flipped, their lives are like flipped, turned upside down, as a reference. um, so if this is actually switched, this is actually, if you think about it, it's more you're in more control of your own cards, and you can. You're not throwing out tokens. This is kind of be going to be for a certain type of deck where you can control larger minions, and it would be a good thing to heal a large minion or yourself, depending
Yeah.
what it actually heals. So it's not as bad as you think. I'm just curious to see how much competitive play it'll actually
I don't
see.
know. I think it looks actually pretty good because just thinking about it from the standpoint of you play it on turn 8 by itself. That is play an 8/8 and heal for 8, which I think is pretty decent. Play a big threat, heal for 8, and then if your opponent doesn't deal with it, that guy can really get out of hand with the heals. And if you have other big minions, like you said, later on, it can synergize. So, I mean, big threats like that usually get dealt with a lot of uses, but being able to play it and heal on the same turn on the right type of deck, I think could be pretty useful.
Oh, and this big crazy gamer is actually saying in chat it can attack too.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
doesn't
this
have the
one actually can
restriction.
attack. Yeah, you
Hmm
don't have to actually rely on the RNG. You just target whatever you want.
Cool. All right. Actually, Cinder, I think this is a good time to actually jump into our tournament results. I know there were a couple that happened this weekend. Do you want to go ahead and talk about the True Silver Championship? Tell us what it was, what kind of format it was.
Yes. So yeah, let's talk about tournament news. So there were actually all eyes were on the HCT Asia Pacific Championships, but there was another tournament going on this past weekend, and that was the True Silver Championships. Now, before I jump into this, let me just throw this out to the audience. If you guys really enjoy this tournament rundown stuff, just give us a tweet, give us an email, let us know what you think. Kenny's been really good about letting me do this. This is kind of my pet project. But everybody seems to enjoy it so far, so let us know what you think. If you like it, we'll keep doing it.
Yeah, we love your feedback on this segment. I think it's really cool. I think some listeners could get a lot of like talking about the tournament scene, a little summary of what's going on every week. So if you guys like it, tell us what you like to hear, what you don't like to hear, and we'll make some adjustments.
Yep. So back to the tournament, True Silver Championship number 2. This is a tournament that's played in the UK at the Insomnia Gaming Festival. Insomnia has, I think, 5 different festivals throughout the year, and the one in Birmingham, which was this past weekend, is where the True Silver Championship is being held. Now, it's in the UK, so it's primarily Euro players, and it's all of the Euro players. Kind of like the after tournament. They just finished up with the Euro HCT Championships 2 weeks ago, and a lot of the same players hopped right into True Silver. There were actually 103 entrants into this tournament, and just about all of them are big name players. A few walk-ons, but it's a big gathering of all the great pro players in Europe, and it's really cool. Now It's a 7 round Swiss, however. So spectating this one is just about impossible. There's it's almost like 3,000 games
Yeah, that
played.
is a lot of games.
There's just no way. So,
Yeah.
maybe catch the VOD of the championships. That might be the only way to really check it out.
Or if
Um,
you're really interested in a particular name, maybe you can follow the player.
yeah, yeah, for sure. After 7 rounds, it breaks into double elimination group, and then that breaks into an 8 man or a 16 man single elimination playoff, which is pretty similar to what we see in HCT. Now, unlike HCT, this is Last Hero Standing. This is not Conquest. Last Hero Standing is kind of the opposite, where you have 3 decks. There's no ban, it's 3 decks. And if you lose with that deck, you cannot pick that deck again. So if you win with your deck, that deck stays. And this creates an interesting meta because you can take in your lineup one deck that will specifically target another deck, right? So if you expect to see a lot of Druid, you can take, that Tempo Mage, because if they win with that Druid, they have to play it again, so you can queue right into it with your counter deck.
Hmm.
So the lineups for Last Hero Standing decks or Last Hero Standing tournaments end up being really creative and off the wall, and people bring lots of experimental decks and wacky things because they figure if they just lose with it, it's gone anyway. They don't have to win with it like they do in Conquest. They'll
Yep.
just queue up their strong deck and try to win the rest of the series. So it's really great tournament for players because players get a lot out of it. They get a lot of play space to experiment with.
It's interesting that they came back with to the last zero standing format because this used to be the original format that even like the World Championship, the first one, started with. And I think now that we've seen Conquest and we tried it out, we've seen kind of like a fair comparison of both, and they definitely both have like their strong parts and their not so strong parts. I think because they made it last zero standing, that is why you have a 7 round Swiss though. Just because when you have like a best of three with last zero standing, you end up with a lot of this series where one deck just runs away with it. Like you'll have Druid just run away with the whole thing sometimes, or aggro decks like do the same. So this is not exciting for anyone. I mean, if anyone remembers the World Championship, the first one at the end, Firebat versus Tiddler Celestial.
Hmm.
It was like a, what, like a 20 minute, 15 minute, 20 minute kind of thing. So fast because the format lends itself to this type of thing. But I like that they're coming back to it and then trying different things, maybe increasing the number of games that player does with it. Definitely increases the logistics of such a tournament, but I think it's a cool experiment.
Yeah, I think so. Kenny, any thoughts on that?
I really like the fact that for the Swiss tournament, it actually shows a lot more. Well, you get the players, like you were mentioning, the players get a lot more out of it, more experience. So that's probably the best type of format that you would want to enter as a player. So those of you that are interested in joining tournaments, that's something I would suggest.
Yeah, as a CCG player, I've played in quite a lot of Swiss tournaments, and it's true you're guaranteed at least the first 5, 6, 7 rounds, whatever. So you get your time's worth even if you're not winning. So on to results. The winner of the whole shebang was a player by the name of Ness, and he's from Torpedo Gaming. Now you may not recognize the name Ness, but inside of European competitive circles, he is a known player and he's a very well respected player, but he just hasn't put up any big results yet. And really, the True Silver Championship was his first big tournament win, so he's now on the map, and you can probably expect to see his name come up again pretty soon. He went 6-1 in the Swiss rounds, and he lost only to his practice partner Board Control, and Board Control went 7-0. So that should give you an idea of his quality. His finals record going through the last 16 single elimination bracket, he had to beat Life Coach 3-2, Camlin 3-1, and Camlin's another not very well known, but he is a very strong player. And then in the finals, 3-2 versus Team Liquid's Dog. So that is
That's a good record
that is an extremely challenging gauntlet to get through.
for sure.
So that gives us the runner-up dog, as mentioned. Third and fourth go to Powder from SK Gaming and Camlin. Fifth through eighth, Zixo, Zalay, Life Coach, and Pokrovac. I'm sure everyone recognizes some of those names.
That's a lot of good names. And what you were mentioning, Pokrovac showing up again here.
Exactly.
We were talking about it last time how he was probably going to be one of the guys to watch out for in the competitive scene this year. And here he is again.
There he is. And True Silver Championship is a Hearthstone Major. That gives 15 HCT points to the winner, and then 10, then 5, and it trickles on down the line. So all these guys got a good chunk of points to go towards the Spring Championship. So we will probably see all these names again.
Yeah, probably because it's a Swiss. They're going to hand out a lot more points for it with the number of people entering too. So before we jump into the HTC tournament, any stats you want to give real quick? We're going to try and keep it a little bit short this week as far as stats, but look for extended notes on our show notes on the website. So.
Yeah, there's usually a lot more in the notes than what I say on the air. Stats for True Silver Championship, phew, man, I feel sorry for the statistician who had to track something like 3,000 games. Um, if they are ever made available, I will compile them.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's ever going to happen.
All right, let's go ahead and go over the HTC AP Winter Championships.
Yep. So this is where all eyes were last weekend. The Asia Pacific Winter Championships on the Play Hearthstone channel. Right down to the results. First place went to Dahyoni, who's a very popular Korean streamer, but has never entered the tournament scene. And I've actually watched some of his VODs. He's a very entertaining streamer. I really enjoyed his play, and he brought some of that flair and some of that dramatic performance to the tournament. So it was a real treat to get to watch him.
Kind of like the Ping Ping Ho
Yeah, well, they
style.
actually played. I
Oh,
think they
cool.
played
I
one or
mean,
two matches.
that Asia Pacific, yeah, he got
Exactly.
some quite some characters.
hmm Second place went to Handsome Guy. Handsome Guy is another Korean player. He is the top point earner for the winter
Handsome
tournament
guy.
scene. Handsome Guy. Yeah.
Yeah, was he handsome?
Well, I guess I can leave that up to the viewers.
That is for the listeners to judge,
Yeah.
Kevin. I'm kidding.
But he wasn't just the top point earner for Korea. He was the top point earner for all of Asia Pacific. So Handsome Guy was actually kind of who people were expecting to take away the tournament. He got to the final match, but Dione just came away with some really creative decks and some very surprising decisions. He was actually concealing Deathwing in his Control Warrior, and he sprung it in the semifinal match. So that was pretty entertaining. Third and fourth went to Navi Ut, who, if you've read any ladder reports, you probably recognize his name. He's a regular top legend player from Australia. And Pin Ping Ho, who we already mentioned, he's probably the best player in Taiwan, and he does a lot of tournaments. And for that, he gets a lot of points and ends up in the HCT championships.
Hmm.
Great. Yeah. I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the Japanese players because you were mentioning when we were talking during the week, you said, "Oh, some of these Japanese players are uh, something to look out for." Anyone stick out to you?
Well, there was only one player from the Japanese region. He was the winner of the Japanese Regional Championship, and his name is Matun. Matun, at least on the first day, this guy was just unbelievable with his level of play. He actually, well, we talk about making reads, right? Trying to predict what your opponent will play and then playing around that to extract less value from their play. He was going another level above that. He was actually predicting what he was playing in Navi Ut specifically in his first match. He was predicting what Navi Ut would play, and then he would bluff the play that would draw out the play that Navi Ut was about to play, and then he would play something that would counter that. And it was a 3-1 match, and the only loss was really just to good top decking, I think. And all respect to Navi Ut, he is of course an extremely good player. I mean, he made it all the way to third, fourth. But that particular series, like Mattoon was on fire. He just played Naviut like a fiddle. And if you watch any match from HCT, watch Mattoon versus Naviut. It is some really impressive play from Mattoon, and I think and I hope we will see him again. And there's one other thing I want to note about Mattoon. I tend to be kind of an emotional guy. I get touched by player stories. In fact, when Dahioni won everything, he was like trying not to cry, and I'm trying not to cry watching him because I'm so happy. So
That's cool. I mean,
Mattoon,
sometimes the stories are pretty touching, and there's like real people putting themselves on the line right there. So they can
yeah,
be get like that sometimes.
there is a lot of emotion that goes into these. So Mattoon, they noted that he was a family guy. He's got a wife, he's got two kids. On his first day, he was wearing, it was like a green shirt, and it had like a stick figure doodle on it. It kind of looked like a kid had drawn on it. After the match, they brought him over for the interview, and they asked him, "What is that?" And he says, "It's a leper gnome. His young daughter had drawn a leper gnome on it and wrote underneath it, 'Give me a big hug,' like how the leper gnome says when he attacks." And he says he wears it because it gives him his esports power. I was like, I almost fell out of my chair. I'm like, I love this guy. He's the best. It's anytime I see a touching story like that, I can't help but fall for a player. So I hope to see him again in the near future.
That's cool. That's cool.
Great. Yeah, we're making some good time. Actually, we got a lot more on the show notes. Again, if you want to know any notable stats, you can go check it out there, or just chat with Cinder if you have a chance to. I'm sure he has a lot to talk about. But let's go ahead and just mention. Go ahead and leave an iTunes review, Stitcher review. We would love to hear from you as far as a review. Uh, that helps us out and it helps other people find our podcasts. Just wanted to mention that before we go into our next segment, our Dexplanations. All right, so this week our Dexplanation segment is going to go over the beatdown theory. Uh, Andres, you want to kind of go over a little bit about the beatdown theory? What is it? What does it
Yeah,
entail?
absolutely. Well, today in the segment, we're going to talk a little bit about the beatdown theory and what is it. It's a big concept in Hearthstone. A lot of people that listen to this podcast might already be familiar with it, or what it is. But I think it's always a relevant topic to talk about. It's a good refresher for those who are not too familiar with it, and it's definitely something that if you have very clear in your gameplay can make you a lot better, make you win a lot more games. So, what is beatdown theory, or who is beatdown? Beatdown is basically the person who is trying to put threats on the board, or that is trying to make a threat of closing out the game, right? Killing your opponent. That is the person who is in charge, or who's called the beatdown deck. Usually, the other person is either called the control or the regressive. I don't know what is the word for that. Receiving,
I don't know. I
countering.
think I think control just works just
Yeah,
fine.
control works fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, basically, when you're playing Hearthstone, you need to ask yourself if you are the beatdown or if your opponent is the beatdown. It's crucial that you do this because if you can answer yourself this question, you can formulate an appropriate game plan that can lead to a win. If you don't ask yourself this question, it's like going to the game blind, right? It's like loading your gun, coming out, and just shooting without looking at anybody. You want to make a plan, and in order to make a plan, you need certain information. And deciding if you are the beatdown is very crucial for that. Um, so, how do you decide if you are the beatdown? You might be asking yourself. The first thing that you need to ask yourself is the deck that you're playing at the time. What is the win condition? That is the most basic question you can ask yourself to answer this. Is your deck trying to close out the game fast? Are you an aggro deck like Pace Hunter or Zoolock? Um, or is your deck made for the long run? What is your opponent's plan? You should be asking yourself too. Are you playing against a massive control warrior or are you playing against another Face Hunter? All these questions are supremely important because based on those is when you decide if you're the beatdown or not. a little more advanced is also the current state of the board, your health, your hand status. Um, Obviously, if you're low in health, low in cards, only have one minion, you might not be the beatdown at that time. You might be more in the realm of trying to control the board to get back into the game. But if you, on the other hand, have plenty of health, have more minions on the board than your opponent, and your hand size is good, then this is when you should be, in the process of the beatdown.
So
Um,
I got a question for you, real quick.
sure.
So if okay, those seem like kind of obvious scenarios. What are there any non-obvious scenarios or anything that would be a little bit harder to tell? What kind of situations would those be?
Yeah, there's also non-obvious situations, like you said, where, for example, you're playing Control Warrior and you're going against another Control Warrior. And in this situation, you're like, well, who's the beatdown in this situation? Um, it gets a little more complicated, but it comes down to the fact of how does your hand look like? Did you draw threats? How does your opponent hand look like? You can draw a lot of hints by the way that they're playing. Are they playing a lot of minions on the board quickly? Even in a Control Warrior mirror, there's certain minions that you can play, right? You can play your Acolytes of Pain, you can play um, Shield Maidens, Sludge Belchers. Sometimes you draw into all of your removal instead. If you're the person who, for example, draws into all of the removal, then you know you're not going to have enough steam to put up a decent wall of threats that your opponent's control warrior is just not going to be able to eat through.
You know,
Um,
there was an example of this at the HCT Asia Pacific.
oh, right, you were talking about this. Why don't you tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about it?
so real quickly, it was Mattoon versus Pinping Ho. They both queued up their Elise control warriors, and Mattoon and Pinping Ho both had that decision. They had to decide: am I going to be the aggressor? Am I going to be the beatdown? And Mattoon looked at his hand, his opening hand after the mulligan. He didn't see a lot of removal, but he did see a lot of card draw. So what he did was he started aggressively drawing cards, trying to get at least Starseeker on the board so that he could drop a lot of legendaries at the end of the game, and it
Hmm.
very, very nearly worked out for him. But even though the RNG didn't go in his favor, he did make the correct assessment based on his hand that he was going to be the beatdown in that situation.
Right. Elise, for example, things like Elise are a good reason or a good clue whether you're the beatdown or not. Like, can your deck put up a good fight at the very end of the match once your threads are exhausted, or is your deck gonna be running into running off of steam by the end of the match? Um, Even if you're in the control warrior, like certain subtleties like that might affect the match a lot. If you're not running Elise, then you know that those extra, like that extra acolyte of pain, or maybe that extra shield slam that your deck has, might be a little clunky versus the mirror. So at that point, you're forced to close out the match before your opponent because if you know you go till the last card, you're at a disadvantage. It comes down a little more subtle, even with like for example a druid mirror. It's a mirror where both players are trying to become the beatdown as soon as possible, and it becomes a matter of who can get that wall growth on turn two, and or who can get the wall growth into Innervate and get those 2 to 3 threats into the board faster, so that the opponent has a very hard time trading favorably because you're gonna have the say in that matchup. Um, so I guess
So
depending on the matchup, sorry, what were we gonna say?
what I was gonna say, it seems almost like figuring out who's the beatdown is also kind of understanding literally where your tempo is in that point of the game, like how you've set up tempo, how where you're planning on going, because some tempo happens later in the game, some tempo happens at the beginning, and you just have to know your deck, what you're playing against, and that seems like it kind of goes hand in hand with the speed down theory.
Yeah, absolutely. The concept of tempo is very crucial to the beatdown theory. Once you get good at defining who is the beatdown, then it turns to tempo. Once you can answer yourself that question, like I am the beatdown or I'm not the beatdown. But if you answer yes, I am the beatdown, tempo becomes literally the name of the game. Um, for those of you, just to give like a little quick explanation of what tempo is because it's a very common word in Hearthstone, a very common concept in it. But in simple terms, it's just the ability to use or play more resources on the board faster or more efficiently than your opponent. And you can do this in many ways in Hearthstone, right? A simple one would be mana ramp. Druids have Innervate, which allows them to cheat pretty much 2 mana before their opponent's can. So you could play a 4 mana creature on your second turn, while your opponent is only playing a 2 mana creature. Therefore, you have played more resources faster than your opponent. Others ways to do this, the same thing would be favorable trading. Let's say you have a 4/5 on the board and your opponent has a 4/4, and you kill that creature with your 4/5, leaving a 4/1 on your board. Now your opponent either has to use another card or another minion, hopefully for you, to get rid of that 4/1, losing resources for him. Now he has to spend more resources than you did to play that creature, getting rid of it. So virtually you have gone ahead in resources. Or things as simple as efficiency, like who can play their resources more efficiently. If a player can play a creature on turn one, on turn two, on turn three, four, and so on, while your opponent maybe plays nothing on turn one, then plays a 2 drop on turn two, then plays maybe only hero power on turn three. Now he's lost 2 mana over you, so by turn five you've played 2 more mana than he has. So you guys get the concept of tempo. But
I think
basically,
another thing, I think another thing to add there too is, say, a control type deck would use a lot of resources, meaning cards, to remove minions or to kind of answer what's done. So another portion of that could be card advantage too. So if you, as long as you can have more card advantage than your control counterpart, then that also takes effect as well. So there's many different there's a big spectrum as far as where this covers, and which is how it can be so involved or very intricate.
Yeah,
So I
if
just
you
wanted
think
to.
about tempo almost as like the beat of a drum, right? Every time you play a minion, every time you play a threat, you're increasing the tempo. Literally, you're quickening the pace at which the game is going to end. And the control player is trying to slow that beat. They're trying to use their resources, their removal cards, to slow the game down. The aggressor, the beatdown, is trying to accelerate that tempo. Turn one, they play a 2 attack minion. Turn two, they play a 3 attack minion, and so on and so forth until they get to close out the game with damage.
and yeah, like you said, it is a tug of war, basically between the beatdown and the control. Now, usually control decks, and we're calling it control decks, and it's a little tricky because not in every matchup, you have a control deck versus a beatdown deck. A lot of times you have a beatdown versus a beatdown, but depending on who gets the tempo advantage, the other one becomes a temporary control, where he's trying to, with a clever play or maybe a lucky draws, being able to overtake that tempo eventually and turn the tides of things and win the battle before the opponent. Um, but yeah, basically is on the beatdown, you're trying to use tempo to your advantage to play threats faster than your opponent, to close out the game faster than your opponent. And it's a simple concept when you explain it like that, but in Hearthstone, when once you apply it, once you get all the variables from card draw, from not knowing what your opponent is playing, what type of deck or archetype he's bringing to the table, it becomes very, very intricate, and it's something that the best players have become very good at identifying right away and playing towards, making their game plan favor this sort of thing. Do you guys have anything else you would like to add?
The one of those intricacies that you talk about in Hearthstone is sometimes it's a little bit of both. You'll see this a lot in Zoom matchups where they may make a favorable trade, but not across the whole board. They might trade 1 or 2 minions and then attack with the other one because they're trying to both slow down their opponent, but still keep up the pace of their own tempo. They don't want to play too much board for risk of slowing down the game too much and giving their opponent a chance to swing the board back.
Absolutely. And then I guess we can give a few examples of decks that are really good at this sort of thing. I think my favorite one, and I think a deck that is really, really good at being the beatdown deck in almost every matchup, is Tempo Mage. Um, Tempo Mage is a deck that is hyper aggressive from the start, and the way the deck is built, it you can play minions as well as wipe the board simultaneously, which not a lot of decks can do. A lot of decks either choose to control the board and not play threats, or play threats and not control the board. But the interesting thing about this deck is that it can do both with tools like Flame Waker or the Mana Worms. Mana Worms that you can play and then use removal to increase the power of the Mana Worm, therefore creating a threat simultaneously. Or Flame Wakers that you can put on the board and then play spells to control the board and use the Flame Waker to keep putting pressure or finish, clearing everything up while still having a minion on the board. So it's a great deck for this sort of playstyle, and I really love it for this sort of thing. Definitely, if you want to be the beatdown almost all of the time, it's a deck that I recommend. Other deck.
That's what I was. You stole my deck. I was going to totally say that one.
Oh,
But
sorry.
I think what I'll piggyback off of what you're going to say was even in Tempo Mage itself, you may find that you could have a nice curve and have a turn one, turn two play throughout your deck, but sometimes depending on who your opponent is, you would want to hold on to your 1/3 mana worm and save some of your spells until later, and you can play more all at once. So that's what I love about that deck, and the certain types of matchups if I'm seeing those on the ladder. Cinder, you were going to say, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, I was just laughing.
Did you have any decks you wanted to add, or
So,
we're getting short on time, so we should hop into the analysis pretty soon
I
here.
mean,
Let's do
if
it.
you want the purest of beatdown aggro decks, Face Hunter.
Yeah, Face Hunter is a great example of beatdown. You're not trying to waste any time with that deck. You're just trying to close the game out. Literally, if that deck could close out the game by turn two, it would do it.
Hmm.
Agrodin, I like my aggro paladin. All right, so let's go ahead and go into our next segment, our card analysis, all the new cards that have been released this week. All right, so I'm going to start with the legendaries first. So the first one I'm going to announce is the 8 mana 6/7. It's the Boogie Monster.
Love the
It's
name.
exactly. I was going to make a comment. I don't. We'll keep it short. Whenever this minion attacks and destroys another minion, it gains 2/2. Andres, you want to go ahead and mention something about this?
So it's an interesting minion for sure. It grows bigger while attacking other minions. It is like a way of healing himself. So I guess it's good at dealing with smaller minions. Like anything that has less than 4 attack, it's worthwhile to eat with this guy. So he'll be a huge guy, and the threat increases too. Um, it's only when you attack though. So if other minions attack it, this won't happen. To keep that in mind. I
Hmm.
like that it's a 6/7. Avoids Big Game Hunter when you play it. So it's interesting because they've been releasing a couple of minions like this in this expansion where they're just below the threshold, but then you can make him go above the Big Game Hunter threshold, kind of like on your turn.
What do you think,
I
Cinder?
think it's a mighty threat, but I'm not like super excited about it.
It's the stats are fairly weak for an 8 drop, and I think we talked about this before. If an 8 drop hits the board, it really kind of needs to present an immediate threat,
Yeah.
and this doesn't. Well, if it wants to grow over time, that's great, but you actually already have a card that does that. Gruul starts
Yeah.
as it's an 8 mana 7/7, and he grows all by himself, and he's not played because he doesn't have an immediate impact on the board. So I don't know if Boogie Monster is really filling a role for any decks.
Yeah, this guy reminds me of like that. Was that Shredder 3000? That
Oh,
was
the Faux
also like
Reaper,
a
Faux Reaper
the Full
9000.
Reaper.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, the Full Reaper. It reminds me of that or Gruul. Yeah, that sort of card. So cool, cool name, cool artwork. For arena, pretty decent stats. Like I said, it's a
Yeah.
very decent thread. But in competitive play, he'll probably be just not impactful enough.
All right, and a little comment I'll add on before we go to the next legendary. It'd be interesting to see other effects on this card. I'm sure there's lots of quote unquote fun decks that will add Wind Fury or a Death Rattle or something to this. That would be very interesting to see. So the next one that's a legendary is our 4 mana 3/2. It's a rogue legendary. I think you pronounce it Zaril, Poisoned Mind, Battle Cry, and Death Rattle. Add a minion or a random toxin to your hand. And Cinder, did you have those toxins pulled up?
Oh man, you know what? I sure don't. But they mostly replicate rogue spells. They're all 1 mana. One of them gives a minion stealth. One of them returns a minion to your hand and reduces cost by 2. One of them does 2 damage. One of them draws a card, and I
Yep.
don't remember the fifth one.
One of them gives +3 attack to a minion.
Oh yeah, it's like
So
Cold
it's
Blood
kind of
basically.
like, yeah, cold blood, but for a minion. So I don't know. I am actually really, really excited about this card. What do you guys think about it?
Ah, go ahead, Kenny.
Well, I don't know exactly. I think it's good. It's another low cost minion for Rogue. It gives you more spells that works off your main combo stat. Um, I don't know. I haven't really thought about this card too much. I'd be very interested to see what.
So
There's a big random effect, but yeah.
I've played my fair amount of Rogue, and usually cards like this are really cool for Rogue. Cards that give you spells into your hand, especially really cheap spells, 1 mana spells, is really good. And the toxins that you get from it are actually very, very good. You get a draw card, you get a deal to damage. Like these are effects that for 1 mana are actually quite useful, especially in a Rogue deck. And in the fourth mana slot, rogues have never had anything too impressive. Um, they've always added Violet Teachers, and sometimes they would add Pilot or Shredders just because it was the most powerful, four slot card that we've had in a long time. But this guy, I think, would fits very nicely into most rogue decks. Like I said, you need impressive stats with him. The 3/2 will be easy to deal with, but hopefully the tempo you lose playing this card in the beginning will easily be gained later when you do your flary combos with rogue.
Do you think he fights for a slot with Tomb Pillager?
Yeah, I think so. I think especially because he's a legendary, a one-off is totally fine. You can have a Tomb Pillager and him. We can even may have two Tomb Pillagers and him in a deck that is trying to generate a lot of extra spell cards.
Hmm.
Yeah, for the Rogue Legendary too. That'll work good with that. For more
Yeah.
spells to play, more cards. All right, so let's go to the next one. It's a 5 mana 2/2. It's a weapon. It's tentacles for arms. Death Rattle. Return this to your hand. I'm not sure what I feel about this. I feel like it's a 2/2. It's not that good for the stats, and for it to return to your hand, would you want to spend another 5 mana for a weapon that's a 2/2? Again, the only thing I could see this would be something that affects your actual weapons, and I don't know. What do you guys think?
Uh, on turn 5 or later, what am I threatening with 2 attack? It's just I don't see a place for it, honestly. I usually try to give cards a chance, but this just seems really bad. I mean, they're in card games. There is value to consider in recursion, which is taking any card that's already been played and being able to play it again. But for 5 mana, no, I don't see it.
Yeah, 5 mana. Unless they come out with a card that says Death Rattle, put Tentacles for Arms into play from your hand or from your deck into play. I don't see this card getting played.
Yeah, something I brought up with Cinder earlier was if something actually affected death rattles, and this is I guess that. Do you remember what card I was talking about? It
You
was
were thinking of N'Zoth, but N'Zoth only works
yeah,
on minions.
That's
yeah.
true.
So
Like you're saying, like if you could able to cheat the cost out,
yeah.
that's the only way I
Well,
can see it. Like for the 5 mana, a 2/2 weapon, like even with this effect, it's just such a huge loss in tempo, and the effect is really not that exciting unless you're like an incredibly like long beatdown deck, and this basically is like a hunter hero power for a warrior, essentially.
For 5 mana.
expensive one. Yeah.
Well, because technically it's a hunter hero power for 2 turns,
Yeah.
just for
So
one more mana,
for
right?
2.5 mana
For
plus some face
2.5 mana,
damage.
yeah, 2.5 mana hunter hero power for warriors, basically, in the late game. So maybe that's the purpose of this card. Maybe just something that can give the warrior a little bit of sustained damage to close games out. Maybe something that they were lacking.
Yeah, like
Um,
if you get into a fatigue war
yeah,
and
like a
nobody
fatigue
has any cards
warrior,
left.
and just have like one of these, and is like, okay, I know that every turn I'm gonna deal 2 damage.
Yeah, that's true.
But for early game and control, like there's definitely better options for it. I see this as a late game card.
All right. Let's go ahead and go into the next one here, which is a 3 mana spell card for Hunter. It's called Infest. Give your minions Death Rattle. Add a random beast to your hand. Andres, what do you think?
This is actually pretty cool. Nusoth Hunter incoming.
Well, N'Zoth only returns minions that naturally have Death Rattle. It will not return anything
Oh,
that's been
you're
given
right.
Death
You're
Rattle.
right. And the other card, the one that triggered all death rattles, that is going away too, right?
Uh, no,
That
I
is
think Feint
that
Death is
isn't that
part of.
JVG? Feign
It
Death? Isn't
is.
JVG?
Is it?
It is.
Oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
sad. Oh
Yeah,
man.
that is very sad because that would be quite nice with this card,
Yeah,
but it won't be here anymore. I guess we'll have it in Wild though. Wild, that'll be some wild stuff, guys.
that's true. This could be. Yeah, this could be a wild card. You know, anytime analyze a card, I'm always thinking of it in terms of standard. And yeah, at 3 mana, I mean, right now Hunter is such a tempo centric
Hmm.
deck. You know, all kinds, either face Hunter or mid range. You know, you're still trying to get as you spend your mana as best as you can, get as much tempo on the board as you can. If I'm spending 3 mana and generating no tempo, that's a big loss in the face race.
Yeah,
And it's the effect is really cool. I actually really like it. It's going to be a struggle to find a place for it. I mean, the mid range hunter that I play does a lot of this. It loses a little bit of tempo to generate card advantage with Tomb Spider and Web Spinner and
yeah.
some of the things, but you have to have a board. Like you have to have at least 2 minions on board for this to even out on the value game. You know, if you have 1 mana or 1 minion or no minions, this card is not going to get played.
It
It's
seems
an
like a
interesting
smaller,
card.
shorter ball of spiders.
A hemisphere of spiders.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I don't know, for a deck that can put out a lot of minions, it's technically like card draw if you can manage to build a board and then play this. Like let's say you have 3 minions and you play this card. It would be like almost like an arcane intellect once your minions die, just at random, right? You don't know what you're gonna get, even though you could get some really good stuff. So it serves as card draw in a very minion heavy deck. Now the problem with it is that you have to have a lot of minions that you can play quick, and hopefully they'll be sticky enough so that you'll have, time to play this card before they wipe your board.
And
It
So
it,
might be more
honestly,
of a
honestly, I see some potential in it. I would have to play test it to see how it works.
the other option is in a token style hunter deck.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
Uh,
was
because
gonna
any
mention
minion
like
works
egg
for it.
druid.
Any 1/1 would work.
yeah, and there
Mhm.
are there are builds. In fact, we saw them in the EU championships. Naaman and Dr. Hippie both had these token heavy hunter decks. Now Tomb Spider's going away, but they utilized Tomb Spider Snake Trap, Unleash the Hounds. A lot of ways to generate bodies on the board.
I was just gonna say that. Imagine turn 6, Unleash the Hounds, Infest, right?
I'd still rather a Knife Juggler, but
Well,
Well, we don't
true. I
know
mean,
how that's going to
for
turn
a
out.
for a board wipe, but let's say on a minion heavy deck where you're trying to fill up your hand
yeah.
again, like you're running low on creatures. This is a Unleash the Hounds Infest. You could draw up to 4 minions, 3 or 4 minions.
It's almost like a back end divine favor, but for
Mm.
hunters.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep it moving. I want to kind of get through the. We're only halfway through here. We already mentioned. Well, I was going to talk about legendaries first, but let's go over the 8 mana 8/8. It's a Ragnaros, light lord. Say that 10 times fast. At the end of your turn, restore 8 health to a damage friendly character. I already said my piece. Cinder, what do you think?
Well, I'm not going to say it 10 times fast, but I think we said the big points. He's an 8/8 that can attack, and he has an immediate board effect. He heals something on your board for 8. If it's face, that's
And
great.
eight is a very significant amount.
I mean, 8/8 for 8 is fine, and then if you get 8 healing out of it, that's a pretty good deal. Also from a flavor standpoint, I love this card. Like it to not to get too deep into lore, but the elemental lords, Ragnaros, Alakir, Nebulon, these guys were servants of the old gods. So this is Team 5 kind of saying, what happens if the servants of the old gods turn against them and fight against them? So you have, Ragnaros redeemed as now a defender of Azeroth, which I think is such a cool concept.
That is pretty cool. The only thing I wanted to add to this card is that usually healing effects in Hearthstone are not that good